alongside the man, the myth, the talent, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy on a pretty seriously wintry Melbourne evening. It's been pretty wet and cold here in the burbs. I imagine it's quite similar up in the hills.
It is shitty. Even the furry star of the show, who is currently in his trailer because he was not happy when I took him out for his walk this morning because it was cold, it was wet, and it was horrible. And he's been grumpy ever since.
You haven't considered doing something about the weather? I mean, he is the
Look,
talent.
I'm a pretty good producer, but there's only so far my abilities go, and I can make bad shit happen to me, but I haven't upgraded to the Globals package yet.
It's a gift. Indeed. Well, I mean, just as an exciting announcement, I think it's safe to announce that next week we have some genuine talent on the show.
Yeah.
An actual one of Australia's leading musicians, at least Melbourne's. One of Country Victoria, one of Donald's leading musicians, the country town of Donald. I think it's fair to say he's one of the leading musicians in the town of Donald. And you got a bit of a clue in my fanboy attire this week about who it's going to be.
He was not paid for that T-shirt. He paid for that T-shirt.
He's huge in South Korea in more ways than one. He's going to kick my ass for saying that.
He really is.
But he will be on the show next week. And if you want to know the rest of the story, you're just going to have to tune in next week because we are going to be watching. I think we can reveal. This is in addition to the Chain movie. We will be watching Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which is we gave as a special guest. We gave him a choice of what he would like to watch with us and discuss.
Bloody 1%ers.
And that was what he decided. I don't know if I've actually ever seen that movie. I know I've seen the TV show. You reviewed it a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago.
I think it was more than a month at this point now. Time is an illusion.
It does slip by. WandaVision was so many months ago now.
I know.
And now we got Loki who came out tonight. Seems so far away once upon a time. But yeah, so I don't think I've ever seen the actual Fire Walk with movie, which is a prequel to the TV show.
Yeah.
So this will be the first, I believe, of a couple of special guest spots we'll be having with our special, super talented, huge guest. And that's we've had guests before, but it's been an awfully long time.
It has been a very long time. We didn't want to spoil everyone too much. There's only so much that fans can really take before they kind of think, oh, they're jumping the shark. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to nuke the fridge. We don't want to do anything like that. So we're trying to be conscientious of our audience, their needs and requirements.
And you want to preserve an air of exclusivity for these sorts of things. We're not, it's a Jimmy Kimmel show. It's like a town bike. Everyone's had a ride.
Exactly.
This show pretty exclusive. We've had, I think, 3 guests on in our lifetime. One was my ex-wife. One was my brother, and I believe the other one was Eric Forrest.
Yes, and that might have even been when we were still G&T podcast. Before we rebranded and became that much more professional.
I think so. I think that was true. So, I mean, joining that illustrious company, and I feel, I feel it's an apt description. Just tune in next week, download the show next week if that's your way of doing things.
Yeah,
and you can enjoy a third voice, and I think a podcast host in his own right. And if anybody is listening to this this week and it gets in before the 16th, which is when it will be going live in Melbourne here.
Yep.
Do feel free to tweet at us and with the hashtag release the Smith cut.
Yes.
That's all I'm going to say. Release the Smith cut.
Yep.
Anyway.
It'll get through to the right people.
That is next week's entertainment.
It is. But for now, let's have a little bit of a rundown of what we're actually going to be talking about this week. So our Chain movie, following on from last week. What was it we watched last week? Hannibal. We followed through with Sid and Nancy, care of Gary Oldman. I've already picked my movie for next week, but Travis has spent some time going in the Wayback Machine He will be talking a little bit about the original Mad Max, not the one that everyone fanboys and girls over now of Fury Road. The original, the progenitor of the Mad Max universe. He also went back and feel like you got a bit of a taste for the 70s and 80s, like a youth comedy, adult themey kind of thing, going to 16 Candles.
Sticking with the John Hughes theme?
I myself took on a slightly newer fare. For example, Raya and the Last Dragon, the latest animated movie from Disney, is available without the premium access payment on Disney Plus. I checked out the new Netflix show Sweet Tooth, produced by Robert Downey Jr. and his wife, Susan Downey, as well as checking out a movie that kind of went a little bit under the radar, Kristen Stewart's Vincent Cassel starring movie, Underwater, which has got a bit of a Cthulhu vibe to it at the end. So that is what we've got. And do we have any sponsors this week, Travis?
We do. Our sponsor is all lined up, and we are being brought to you by Channel 10 from May 10th, 1992.
Look at that. That is an important date.
We're going to import some important messages in there for the 1992 Victorian state election.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So listen to the sponsors and let them know that we sent you that way. Let's get straight on into the show, shall we? We'll go straight into chain movie of Sid and Nancy.
Yeah, so this one I chose because I try to stick to films I've never seen in this. And this has a bit of a reputation of being a bit of a cult classic. It is, of course, a story. I mean, the synopsis here is almost on a level with Minari the other week. As one of the worst synopses I've ever read. The relationship between Sid Vicious, bassist for British punk group Sex Pistols, and his girlfriend Nancy Spungen is portrayed. What a very odd sentence that is.
Yeah, and the movie that it shows, that's incredibly boiled down to essentially nothing.
Alexander Lum on IMDb from UTAS, University of Tasmania, where if you don't have two heads, the second one's free. Morbid biographical story of Sid Vicious, bassist with British punk group the Sex Pistols, and his girlfriend Nancy Spungen. When the Sex Pistols break up after their fateful US tour, Vicious attempts a solo career whilst in the grip of a heroin addiction. One morning, Nancy is found stabbed to death, and Sid is arrested for her murder. That's a little bit more, I guess, all-encompassing, but that's essentially it's a story of Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen, who are kind of punk rocks, Romeo and Juliet, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. Very, very much the poster children for the dysfunctional relationship, I think, for many people.
The Joker and Harley before Joker and Harley were Joker and Harley, you know? The Courtney Love and Kurt Cobain of the late 70s, if you will. And interesting, Courtney Love is in this film. So Gary Oldman portrays Sid Vicious. We have Chloe Webb, who plays Nancy Spungen. This is her film debut. You're probably going to go, who the fuck is Chloe Webb? And that's a fair question. The only thing I could look at her and go, I know I've seen her in, was she was in Twins, the Schwarzenegger DeVito film.
Fuck, she was.
Yeah. We have Xander Berkeley in here as a drug dealer. And as I said, Courtney Love plays the best friend or friend of Nancy. The rest of it's a pretty you might know some of these people. I suspect they're probably better known in the UK than they are to me.
There were a couple of faces that were familiar, but largely kind of an unknown. This movie is very much over time. There was a period in the mid 80s to early 90s where a lot of British movies that were made were ridiculously gritty, and it was a lot of very low budget production for very, very dramatic stuff. And this movie it plays the drama to 11. Fuck me, it's tough to watch overall.
It's written and directed by Alex Cox. Again, not exactly a household name. He did get one of his better known works as a director was for film Repo Man, which I haven't actually seen, but I know of it.
Same.
It's kind of, I think, a pretty well-known, again, cult film. Other than that, he hasn't done anything of particular note. He, I believe, was a member or he might call it a punk himself. He was someone who was a part of the late 70s UK punk scene, and hence why he's great interest in making a film about two people who maybe not even 10 years after this shit happened. We have the biopic. And you sort of said this is a very gritty, grimy sort of film. I got serious Trainspotting vibes watching this.
It's almost like a cross between Trainspotting and the London-based elements of With Nail and I. There is, like, as they're walking through the streets, there's kids just beating the shit out of cars. There's burning trash cans and sirens constantly going off in the background. Britain is not in a happy point during this phase. This was, I think this would have been kind of height of Thatcher-esque England.
No, this is pre-Thatcher.
Was it really? Oh,
Thatcher
yeah,
was
70s.
elected in 79, so this would have been the this is what led to Thatcher.
Yeah, that's right. So there's definitely that kind of element of the social discourse and despondency that really plays into it, and I think they're purposefully trying to heighten a lot of that to kind of explain how punk became a thing and how the lives of Sid and Nancy were kind of justified in their own minds of sort of like beating their own path and that sort of stuff. It's a weird film. It's
an odd one, and it's interesting that it's really quite highly rated by a lot of people I respect. Roger Ebert felt it was one of his best, I think his fourth best film of 1986. And he's probably my favorite film critic. You can find their episode on the best films of '86 on YouTube. I am a bit of a fan of Sex Pistols. I guess I'm a passing fan. I mean, because I don't own I don't own records anymore. But I do own
CDs and DVDs.
Not many. Most of them are gone. But yeah, so I like some of their music, and I know I've listened to it, and I know a little bit about them. I've read a little bit about them. And I think it's important to recognize as a music fan their importance in the history of rock and roll. That's up for debate for someone else. I'm sure would tell me I'm wrong. But it's worth noting here that the surviving band members, particularly John Lydon and Johnny Rotten, when asked about what this film got right, he said perhaps that his name was Sid. Yeah, I think that's about it. So he is not a fan of this production, and he feels like it was quite fictionalized and sensationalized, and bears some little resemblance to the reality of what actually happened. And I'm okay with that, really. I mean, I think though that from what I understand about Sid Vicious, that Gary Oldman's performance is quite good. Gary Oldman himself is not a fan, apparently, of his performance and doesn't like it and has spoken derisively about the film. He's not a fan of the script. He wasn't a fan of the music, and he did it for the money, which is fine because he did a good job. It's still a good film. He
got him a lot of attention that has spawned one hell of a career.
And I initially, throughout the film, found Chloe Webb's performance as Nancy almost unendurably awful. I mean, like she was hard to listen to. She was so nasal and screechy and annoying to a point of almost being parody-esque. Yeah. But what I did after I finished this film was I went and watched some YouTube clips of the two of them doing interviews.
Same.
And I was actually going to give Chloe Webb a bit of a pass here and go, yes, you were very nasal and annoying and screechy, but that is in character. That was her in character. Like she did sound like that.
Yeah, I agree.
So, in the end, strangely good performance in the sense that you actually were accurately annoying. As Nancy.
It's always hard when someone is playing a character that is that abrasive, that just vile in every sense of it. She never looked healthy or fresh-faced or anything like that. So it was always visually hard to look at her. The voice that she had, it was always just like nails on chalkboard for me listening to her. The way that she would just flop so quickly from this just irrational disaster of a person to begging and screaming and crying, and then the next scene she's like trying to get a gig and things, and she's just trying her best to be charming, and it's a really fucking hard character to watch. And this movie holds nothing back, and it doesn't really show you anyone. Like I've talked about this in the past with other movies, there's no sympathetic character in this. It is cold hard, telling a story of a destructive relationship.
It really is. It's and I think a lot of that can be put down to the fact that I know Alex Cox was certainly not a fan of Sid. I don't know his wider thoughts about the Sex Pistols. There are a lot of people who look down on the Sex Pistols as being the Spice Girls of punk rock. That they were put together by Malcolm McLaren rather than the organic forming of a group of people. Interestingly, the music in this film, the soundtrack, was done by Joe Strummer, he of The Clash. So that's an interesting combination. Not that they were rivals or anything, they were both certainly peers. But they are certainly not looked upon as fondly as The Clash because of that. The genesis in being put together by someone rather reviled in the way of Malcolm McLaren. But I think I've read somewhere that Alex Cox felt that he had sold out. Alex Cox's attitude toward this subject was indeed unapologetically negative, writing that Sid had sold out, contributed nothing of value, and died an idiot.
That definitely comes through. There are multiple scenes where the producer, I think it's played by David Heyman, Malcolm, he just talks about how Sid is, I can't remember the exact words, but it's something along the lines of a delicious disaster, a superstar. And it's like, this is a fabricated band that he is just happy to throw them. Like it's all played very obviously that they know Sid is on this.
The thing is, he couldn't play. I don't think there's some people who say he never learned to play bass. I mean, that's not to say that the Sex Pistols initially weren't exactly Eric Clapton. They weren't Van Halen, right? That was part of their appeal, was they were raw and gritty and untrained, unkempt, unpolished.
That was what the kind of the message that they were being pushed and selling is, like, we are anti-establishment. We aren't going to be that fine-tuned, auto-tuned kind of,
as opposed to
coming through.
The story is that Malcolm McLaren found Johnny Rotten when he came into Vivienne Westwood's bondage sex shop, when he wore a T-shirt that said "I hate Pink Floyd." They were the anti-Pink Floyd. And I know we have some listeners, regular listeners who been in touch with me who are huge Pink Floyd fans. You know who you are. So don't get too upset about the fact that Johnny hated Pink Floyd. But that was kind of the sound of a time. If you think about that early sort of polished, overly produced, kind of, one might say, pompous or pretentious sound. So, but despite that, I mean, they could, to some degree, I think. Glenn Matlock, was it Glenn Matlock who Sid replaced, actually could play, sort of. Sid simply couldn't play at all. And I think it's portrayed in the film as he was the man who exemplified everything about the music, everything about punk rock except the music. And there's a great line at the end where someone sees him, he's completely trashed in Paris or something, and says, "You're going to make somebody a lot of money." So he has some sympathetic angles in the sense that he was viewed as a product to be sold by maybe people who are more sophisticated than him.
Absolutely. I think that this is like this is the closest I think we're going to really get, at least for the time being, of the biography movie equivalent to something like Bohemian Rhapsody, which was one of the last big musical icon band biographies to come out, and that was incredibly shallow. and incredibly protective of the image and look of the band Queen. It was incredibly vanilla. This is almost the antithesis of that, in that where there were elements of the Bohemian Rhapsody movie going into a bit of the destructive relationship between Freddie Mercury and this other guy, whose name I can't remember. That was very much, you kept on getting those little cutaway shots and those little moments with the rest of the band, Brian May and all of them, just kind of looking concerned and looking worried about it. Whereas you didn't get any of that. There was no camaraderie within the band. It was all, well, fuck you too attitude. And it was a very cynical telling of, I guess, a very cynical time.
Yeah, but I think I think you'd be a little bit ripped off if you went to see a Sex Pistols movie and got something as safe and vanilla and dull as Bohemian Rhapsody. And in the story of Era, we talked about it when we reviewed it, was that Sacha Baron Cohen had been in line to play Freddie Mercury in his own Queen biopic for some time, but apparently that was a lot more true to life. And that
mixed by the band.
A little bit rawer than what, and the band just felt that was not good for business, which in fairness, I probably wouldn't put that past the Sex Pistols for what they're worth. Malcolm McLaren's dead, but the other three of them are still alive. So I wouldn't be, it'd be a little bit edgier. But anyway, I don't see anyone lining up at Johnny Rotten's house to be either film rights to the band. They're not quite as fondly remembered as Queen. They don't have that back catalogue either.
Now, did you actually like this movie?
No. I found it. I mean, like a lot of people, it's got a 7 on IMDb. It's got a 76 on Metascore. I didn't like it very much. I found it hard going. It was almost nihilistically depressing. Like it was constantly piling on them. It was a constant pile on of human misery. Yeah. Almost like Requiem for a Dream. But like less artsy. Grittier than Requiem for a Dream, if that's possible. So it in a way you almost did feel sorry for Sid in the end. Like he had a horrible existence in the end of his life. And it's probably worth noting here, the story is that he did die of drug overdose some month, 6 months or something after Nancy died. He was never convicted of her murder. I don't know if it was actually charged. I don't think they actually really ever quite figured out what happened to her. She was found dead in his fair apartment, but he was drugged. He was drugged up, and a lot of people had access to it. So, in fairness to Sid's memory, he was never convicted of that murder. Did he commit it? We'll never know. Tragically, the heroin that killed him was given to him as a birthday present by his mother. This dude had a bad start. His mum was a junkie. He had a bad start in life, and it didn't get any better for him. So, whereas, I always heard, I remember back in the day, it'd say Trainspotting was a film you endured rather than enjoyed. I think this is in the same category, but I think even the level of endurance required for this film would be significantly more than I would say for a film like Trainspotting, which was somewhat entertaining. He said,
there was that constant element of comedy to it and absurdity, whereas this, it did not play anything for laughs, and there was an element
of hope at the end of Trainspotting, right? Renton turned his life around to some degree, and if you ignore the sequel, it's probably for the best. You can walk away from that going, well, there's a light at the tunnel. There is no light at the end of this tunnel. The light at the end of a tunnel in this film is the cinematography, which is done by Roger Deakins, the great Roger Deakins.
Legendary man.
Dual Academy Award winner. I believe he won for 1917, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
And another one, his other one was quite recent. He also did Skyfall. So he won for Blade Runner 2049, a film that you and I absolutely didn't love, and just, sort of just gaped out. How good does this film look? We didn't do that at all.
No,
other film, Skyfall, Sicario, Verita, No Country for Old Men, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Fargo, The Shawshank Redemption. So a pretty piss poor resume, frankly.
He's cruising.
Pretty forgettable sort of set of films to have been involved in there. And this film looks, in parts, completely undeservedly gorgeous. I mean, there's there's two scenes that really stood out to me while I was watching it, going, "Who the fuck shot this thing?" Because this does not seem like the work of Alex Cox. Who, in fairness to him, seems like a pretty low-rent kind of director. There's a scene where after the famous boat ride, which is where they get arrested, or the cruise gets pulled over by when they were playing "God Save the Queen" on the river, and the cops are all raiding the boat. And they're just sort of surrounded by cops. I think it's slow motion, if I'm not mistaken. And through the middle of this lot of, what do you call it? It was a collective noun for a group of police, a corruption. A corruption of police. Through the middle of them just comes out. We see Sid and Nancy walking towards the camera through this throng of people and police and fuss and people yelling and shouting, and there's this kind of serenity to the two of them walking through. And I've heard it described as if they were walking through almost in their own bubble, surrounded by this bubble of peace, almost like contentment just between the two of them, which was bumping up against the world around them of these great police. I'm like, that was a gorgeous shot. And there's another shot which you can actually see on IMDb. If you look at IMDb, it's on the poster.
With the trash slowly falling
they're
down.
basically in an alleyway in New York, and they're kissing against a dumpster, and it's raining garbage around them, and you're like, what a gorgeous shot, an undeservedly gorgeous shot in a film like this. It has no place in this film. But
and then it makes it even more kind of jarring when you see those two shots in particular versus the sequence of Sid singing solo for it's a music video that he shoots up the audience and stuff. It's just so ham-fisted, and it just seems like a completely different production team working on that versus these ones. It's like, this is what is going on here?
That's almost certainly true. What happened? That's almost certainly what happened. They had a second unit shooting stuff in I think in New York. Scenes were shot separately to the London scenes, so it's entirely possible that they did. That may well have actually been shot by somebody else. If you're if you're a fan of Sex Pistols, it's a curiosity. The guy who plays Johnny Rotten is almost convincing in parts. Andrew Schofield. Apparently, John Rotten did not like him because he is when you taught me this word, he is a scouser.
Never trust a scouser.
And this, you had to tell me about this concept before I went to Liverpool. So just to go back on that point, so apparently the filming in Los Angeles and New York was performed by a largely different crew. So depending on where that scene was shot, it could have been shot by someone different. But if you're a Sex Pistols fan, it's a curiosity, maybe worth checking out. If you're curious and you've never seen it before, if you are a Sex Pistols fan and you want something a little bit more meaty, I would
probably miss this.
I would go straight. I would spend my time first going to the Filth and the Fury, which is a documentary, but a typically Sex Pistols documentary from 2000. It is a film about the career of a notorious punk band. It's directed by Julian Temple, who is mildly well known around the place. He directed Earth Girls Are Easy.
Okay. Cinematography at its highest there.
Yes. But it has the surviving members and Malcolm McLaren before he died talking about the band and Sid and stuff like that. And it's actually one of the best scenes in the film is where John talks about what happened to Sid. So if you're a fan of Sex Pistols and you'd like to see something about them, on TV, I was gonna say at the movies, but you'd like to watch something, a film about some, I would go for Filth and the Fury. Before I would go with Sid and Nancy, you can see the artistry in here. Like I said, you can see Roger Deakins' work's notable. It's Gary Oldman's very good. Chloe Webb, despite being excruciating to watch, is actually doing her job brilliantly.
Doing justice,
and a very young Xander Berkeley. What do you think? Would you recommend it to someone?
As a curiosity, yes, but anyone who is a Sex Pistols fan, I don't think they would like it. I don't think they would like the way the band is portrayed, the way the music is portrayed, the way that the band members are portrayed. If you are a fan of Gary Oldman, I think it's a solid performance from him, but I would also say it's one of his most boring. I kind of felt like the kind of the journey that he had and the way that the story of Sid Vicious's life is told in Sid and Nancy, there's an immaturity to it all that kind of feels like student production. And there's a lot of focus on the extreme moments and nothing in between. There's no sweet for the salt. Everything is either they're kind of riding each other really fucking hard physically or verbally, and it's just kind of batting between those two, or they are in a kind of drug and alcohol fueled coma essentially. And it's like, wow, we're not getting any kind of build up here. It's one extreme to another. Because of that, it feels very disjointed, and it's hard to kind of just embrace. Like the last 35-40 minutes of the movie, it feels like there's an active effort to try and get people onto Sid's side and get him as a slightly more compassionate person. Like he's the one who brings up getting off the drugs and things like that, but it's like a throwaway line here or there, and then it's just kind of forgotten about again. And it's like, okay, you don't really know kind of who you're supposed to be kind of rooting for, because Nancy is not played for sympathy at all. Sid is rarely played for sympathy up until the end half hour, like I just said.
And then is it sympathy or is it pity?
Yeah, and it's a very fine line, and it's like, okay, it comes across as just kind of pathetic. And because of that disjointed kind of way that they are pushing the character, Gary Oldman's performance, whilst I did the same as you, I went back and I kind of looked at some interviews and things like that I found on YouTube. It's like, okay, both performances of Sid and Nancy are actually quite accurate, and there's a lot of reference that has gone into these performances, but it doesn't serve when the story around them is not supporting them in the way that really deserves.
It needed to be. I mean, I guess it depends what the director wanted to do. I mean, if you wanted to make an anti-drug film that says being a drug addicted rock star, what isn't that glamorous? Then he's done a fine job.
Yeah.
But without it's not romanticized in the slightest.
No, it's not.
So that's why I think it reminded me of Requiem for a Dream, which is a relentlessly nihilistic depiction of addiction.
Yeah.
It's a horrible life he has for himself, and he just can't pull himself out of it. So if you're in a bad mood, give this one a miss, and maybe watch the DC film you're going to talk about later.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm glad to have seen it. I'm glad to have ticked it off my list. It's a cinematic curiosity, I think. It's interesting to see where people come from, to see this film. It's kind of a famous cult film now. I'm glad to have seen it.
I guess part of it as well, this movie came out, 86. It was that kind of deconstruction of a biography thing. It was not a particularly popular genre. up until like the 90s or anything, when you started getting a lot more of the higher profile kind of biography movies about presidents and things like that, where they do start going into a little bit of the darker side of things. So this was a bit of an outlier as a genre piece. So it was. I think it's
even today in a way, like we don't. As you sort of noted, like I don't see a Chris Cornell biopic coming anytime sooner. You know, if you're going to tell a story about a tragic rock star, you tell a story about a tragic rock star with a tragic death, like Freddie.
Yeah,
you couldn't possibly have foreseen AIDS, right? Like, you know, there really hasn't. There been some people have had a go at a Kurt Cobain film without actually using his name because, you know, I don't know, they're allowed
no one's giving them the rights.
You know, so. But did anybody really want to see that? Does anyone want to see a Kurt Cobain movie?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that something like that is probably the same problem that we've come up with Sid and Nancy is, if you're a fan of Nirvana, do you want to see a movie that focuses on the band's eventual destruction?
Him killing himself in a greenhouse? I mean, no.
Yeah, it's not going to sell tickets.
I mean, I think it's been done. It was that Last Days movie. Was it Gus Van Sant?
Yeah, that's right.
But I think it was the Kurt movie. You know, it was the dollar store version where we like, you know, it's the Kurt film. It's not really about Kurt.
Yeah,
it just looks like him. We go Last Days. It starred Michael Pitt.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. But people, and you know, I mean, maybe Nirvana could support it because they had the back catalog, right? I mean, you know, you can go along and listen to Smells Like Teen Spirit and the time. But I mean, it's just not a good story. And I'm not sure Sid and Nancy's a great story. I mean, they've tried to frame it in this Romeo and Juliet-esque, you know, framing device of him being interviewed by the police.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
So it was very much a punk movie, is anti-establishment from the get-go. So I guess it makes sense that it's kind of divisive. Some people really hold it in high regard. Other people just watch it and go, I don't get this. This is a mess. This is volatile for no reason.
It also had some unfortunate reminders for me of Spinal Tap. The scene where we're at the cafe and Sid and Nancy's doing all the talking for Sid, and you know, it kind of reminded me of some of those scenes where Davis and Hubbard's girlfriend is doing the Stonehenge drawings, and you know, the face mate, you know, like not quite, because you know it's about metal and not punk rock, but I'm like, it's not that far away.
Yeah, it's. I guess that's going to be part and parcel of it. You know, Spinal Tap is one of the best parody movies of all time, so it's hard to not look back on the source material that it is lampooning and go, "No, serious. We got it. This is serious.
It's a serious movie. Yeah,
very serious." Right.
Anyway, have you got anything else you'd like to say before we find out what your best kept secret? That I think we all know what you've chosen, because I'm pretty sure I know what you've chosen, because it would have been absolutely what I would have chosen if I had the chance, and that is, of course, Chloe Webb's most recent acting credit, Wish Upon a Unicorn.
No, it is not. It is not. We are following Andrew Schofield, Johnny Rotten himself. We are going to Kenneth Branagh directed, adapted, and starring Hamlet. This is one I have not seen before, but this has got one or two possible avenues for you for next week.
My main problem with this choice is it's 4 hours.
Hey, we haven't done a 4-hour movie since Zack Snyder cut, so it's been a month and a half. But, you know, listen to this cast. Kenneth Branagh, Julie Christie, Derek Jacobi, Kate Winslet, Richard Attenborough, Brian Blessed, Richard Briers, Billy Crystal, Judi Dench, Gerard Depardieu, Ken Dodd. There's even Charlton Heston, Rosemary Harris. If you want to go to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, there's your link. I think it's actually even got
Didn't Robert Williams have a
Robin
cameo in
Williams,
this?
yeah.
And you're forgetting Sir John Gielgud in here,
Yeah.
Charlton Heston.
This is a
Jack
legitimate
Lemmon.
all-star cast. Every single one of them. You look through the cast list and you go, "Oh fuck!"
Kate
Timothy
Winslet.
Spall, Rufus Sewell. It's there he is. Everyone is in this movie.
It's going to be a long watch show.
Yep.
I struggle with. I guess struggle with Shakespearean English.
Mm.
And another way I'm going to be thinking of that the scene from Last Action Hero that we reference all the time. Who said I was fair? To be or not to be? Not to be.
But this is going to be on. It's available to rent and buy on Apple TV and Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So there we go. That is next week's Chain movie.
That will be in addition to, of course, Fire Walk with Me.
Yes, absolutely.
If you want to watch along, I believe it's available on Stan in Australia.
Fantastic. There you go. Right. Shall I cleanse the palate a little bit?
We're going to cleanse the palate. We'll cleanse the palate first after that, and then we'll get a word from our sponsor afterwards.
Yeah. So I'll only talk quickly about Raya and the Last Dragon. Raya and the Last Dragon is the latest Disney animated feature film that had the misfortune of falling into the COVID delays, and then it ended up coming out on Disney Plus Premium Access, where you can watch it straight away for an extra $30 payment or something like that, but then you don't get to keep it, or some weird thing about it.
I wonder how they're going with that. I can't imagine many people choose to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that was only in there for maybe 6 weeks exclusivity before it went on to the standard Disney Plus service. And now they've got Cruella on their premium access movie. It seems like they only have one movie at a time. I still find it bizarre that a Pixar movie of Soul was straight away for everyone. It wasn't a premium service, because that's a kind of movie, a prestige. The Pixar prestige.
With the Pixar brand on the top of it,
yeah,
you get a lot. I've not heard of this movie, Raya and the Last Dragon.
Yeah, but and it was kind of in the press for quite a while, because it was an all Asian cast for one thing, and it was Kelly Marie Tran coming back after being fairly ostracized for her performance of Rose Trico in the Star Wars sequels. And she does a great job with the voice, but overall, the whole thing kind of feels very derivative. It's the stereotypical story of nations breaking apart and then a lone hero trying to save the world. And anyone who has ever watched the Nickelodeon show Avatar: The Last Airbender will look at this and go, wow, they borrowed really heavily from that show, didn't they? Yeah, they did. There's a lot of references, and Avatar does it way, way better, largely because, like most things, when you're trying to tell a complex, full world and a story that spans a continent, such as Raya, it ends up becoming a bit of a flick book when they go, oh yeah, I'm just going to go from this nation to this nation to this nation to this nation, collecting stones to save the world. It's like, wow, this country seems really, really small. Or it's like, okay, I have no connection, and everything just happens so conveniently. So it's, if they had put this, increased the story, just spent more time developing the story and actually made it like a mini series, it might feel more interesting and less derivative of all of these other fantasy movies and books and TV shows and tabletop RPG games that have very obviously influenced this. And it's not only the story that kind of feels derivative, but the animation seems weird. The vistas, the look, the locations are stunning. It is really beautiful, but the animation of the people is really weird, particularly the father in this. Whenever he talks, the animation just seems very robotic and it doesn't seem natural. Like when you look at the Pixar stuff, when it's the humans, going back to even their sort of like early human references of The Incredibles, the muscles when the characters talked in these lovely close-ups that they had, it looked real, it looked believable. But in this, it kind of looks like there's key frames missing from the animation, and it looks kind of like a buggy version of Mass Effect Andromeda or something like that. It just doesn't look quite right. It's like, this is a weird movie.
This is computer animation. This isn't cell animation or something.
It's computer
crazy.
animation. It's computer animation, and it just every single landscape looks lush and photorealistic. Water, lighting effects, all of that stuff. But then you just got this weird animation of the people. It's like, I don't know why you're doing that. That's never been a problem for Disney before. That's never been a problem. Why are you? Stop it! And it's very frustrating. So it's a fine movie. It is one that you can, if you're still in lockdown, like a lot of people are, it's a perfect one for kids because it's got that Doctor Who level of threat. There is a persistent level of fear throughout it, but there is this constant level of hope, optimism, and winning overall that just oozes very, very kid-friendly.
I was going to say, so this is obviously at a much younger audience than, say,
100%.
most of your Pixar films.
100%. There have been people who have kind of said, oh, this is the first animated movie that Disney have made where there's a bit of a lesbian relationship going on. It's like, I didn't get that feeling at all between those two characters. It's more frenemy, and I think people are reading a lot into that. But if you get that, cool. I just think if they're gonna do that, it deserves proper attention.
Well, this is the same thing I said about the last of the Star Wars sequels. Oh no, there's going to be a gay relationship, the first gay relationship in the Star Wars universe, and it's like a quarter of a second kiss between two background characters, but they cut out when they released in China. You know, if they had any balls, it would have been Poe and Oscar Isaac, whatever his character's name was.
He was Poe.
Well, we have John Boyega. Finn and Poe. But see how I've just completely blacked out my memory of those awful, awful films. So I have a friend, someone at the moment, who's trying to convince me to rewatch The Last Jedi with a feminist perspective. So I'm going to do that soon. And that would be maybe that'll change my mind. But anyway, if I had any balls, it would have been Oscar Isaac and John Boyega's character because he was screaming for it, and you can't cut that out. It would have been a lot harder to cut that out. But of course, Disney don't have any balls, and that's probably why they make so much money.
So yeah, I mean, if you've got access to Disney Plus, if you've got kids, sure, Raya. But otherwise, if you want something that's a bit more universally tailored with more world development in it, more character development, more poignancy, then stick with Netflix, watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, and then go ahead and watch Korra, because that actually grows up with the audience. It doesn't have the same young audience primary focus that Avatar had. It actually becomes like a teenagers and older focus of story. So it's great.
That was the Avatar: The Last Airbender. That's the one that M. Night Shyamalan directed, right?
There are certain movies that we agree do not exist, and that is one. That is not a good interpretation of the source material in any way, shape, or form.
That was a low blow. It reminds me of a time we were in Adelaide, and you suddenly figured out that I'd been confusing Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z all these years.
Why do you hurt me? Why do you hurt me?
That film hurt me. I haven't quite got over that film yet. That was 5 years ago.
Well, there you go. You made me watch Death Machine, so. But that's just my quick thoughts on Raya.
That sounds like a middling success at best.
It's middling at best, yeah.
If you think if I haven't seen any of that shit you just mentioned, I haven't seen Avatar, I haven't seen Korra and whatever it was. If I'm not familiar with all those,
no point in watching it.
I'm not going to think this is actually quite good if I'm not picking up and ripping other stuff off.
No, because even though you haven't watched any of those particular elements, you'll look at it and go, "Oh, this is using." It's so. Yeah, I guess like we've talked about it in the past. One of our highly enjoyed movies is John Carter, and how that source material has been data mined so brutally for Star Wars, for Superman, for all of these things. Going back to this, it's all like, okay, there's, anyone who, when you watch it, you kind of go, okay, I feel like I've seen this before. It's because you have in so many things. It's kind of sad. It's very, very shallow.
Rightio.
Anyway,
I think it's time for a word from our sponsor.
I think you're right. Yes.
So,
Let's cue up our sponsors.
Just cue up our sponsors over here. And it's going to take me a second. It's the technology at its best.
We are nothing but professional.
And there we go. Oops, hang on a second. Give me a second. I'm going to do that again. I've got to click the button to share the audio.
Share that audio. People need to know. All right. Back.
The guilty party. Tony Blowout Sheehan. It doesn't add up, Mr. Sheehan. The Auditor General has just told us that Victoria's bank account, the Consolidated Fund, was in the red by $2 billion in March. And that's $768 million more than you told us it was. What are you covering up, Mr. Sheehan? Labor never learns, does it? Guilty. Authorised by P. Giorgio for the Liberal Party, Melbourne.
Where else but Westco?
Where else could you find Angora knits for $29.95? Or the latest pirate shirts for $39.95? And pirate jeans only $69.95. And where else could you pick up sweats like these for $25.95? These baseball jackets only $55.95. Pure cotton hand knits?
Where else?
Only $39.95.
Where else but Westco?
It's morning again in the world of American Express. In 1,000 cities, our 50,000 people will commit themselves to giving our card members the very best. Before this day is done, American Express card members will visit virtually every country on Earth. And they'll expect every one of 1 million transactions they make to go smoothly, every request to be met in full, and every call for help to be answered before this day is done. Our commitment to this unique standard of service doesn't vary one iota from day to day, city to city, all around the world.
Have we got any more copying paper?
I got it! Yes!
Choosing the best copying paper is a reflex action, because you can rely on reflex.
More terrifying than Alien.
I think he'll have our crew!
More mysterious than the abyss.
Never encountered anything like it in my life.
Deep under the ocean
The seafloor is giving way.
looms the ultimate fear.
Can we kill it?
For the first time on
Are you
television.
telling me they disappeared?
Monday on Channel 10, Deep Star 6.
Well, there you go. Deep Star 6. Have you seen that, George?
No, but I am morbidly curious.
I am a little bit. I looked it up before the show. It didn't sound very good. I am not sure it's more terrifying than Alien. It's quite a statement. So yeah, crappy movie. And I particularly like the guilty party ads in there this week. That was a very effective commercial during the state election back then, which the ALP got absolutely stomped like a narc at a biker rally. And we were stuck with Jeff Kennett for 6 or 7 years. You missed the good times.
Hey, at least back in those days, someone was able to actually keep the job for more than 2 years.
Hey, we've had a full-term PM now for a little bit, right?
No, he's not been here.
Well, picky.
He's just been a placeholder. No one's actually realised that it's just a cardboard cutout that's going like this.
That's exactly what we needed. After he's not offending anybody in his own party. He's going to get him fired. There's your daily fix of Australian politics. That's why people they tune into the show for that.
They do.
What they don't tune in though for, and they're about to see, is they do not tune in. See me sticking the boots into a beloved Australian classic, but
sticking the boots in.
Sticking the boots are going in to Mad Max 1979. They are going in. They're going in hard.
How dare you, sir? That is a national treasure.
She was on EastEnders. How dare you? So I visited my bubble buddy on Saturday night, and I was in the mood for some Mad Max, but she'd already seen Mad Max Fury Road. So we decided to go to see where it all started. I kind of would have preferred to go for Mad Max 2 Road Warrior, but that isn't. For some reason, that and Thunderdome aren't available on Stan, but Mad Max and Fury Road are. So
that smells like what people do for the Highlander movies. Highlander 1, occasionally you'll get Highlander 3. You'll never get Highlander 2.
And they're talking about rebooting that right now.
Yeah, with Henry Cavill.
No.
Interesting choice.
No. Naughty Hollywood. Naughty. Where else are you going to get the joy of a Frenchman playing a Scotsman and a Scotsman playing a Spanish peacock? I mean,
who spent lots of time in Japan.
It's just not going to work.
Yep.
Anyway, so Mad Max, if you haven't seen it, obviously probably everybody knows the franchise. It's huge. It's a global icon of a franchise that I think they're filming or have filmed or will be filming a 5th film with Anya Joy Taylor, whatever her name is, from Queen's Gambit.
Yep.
As Furiosa, the character played by Charlize Theron in Fury Road, and if George Miller's back involved, I'm on board. I mean,
George Miller is a talented man.
When I look at a film like Fury Road, I go, he had a Justice League movie in the works. He had a script. He had a cast. They were scouting locations. They had costumes. They had a green light until the writer's strike. What could George Miller have done with the fucking Justice League? You know, what could that have been? Anyway, who knows? Armie Hammer was Batman, I think it was, and Megan Gale was Wonder Woman. I don't remember the rest of the cast. But it would have been fascinating to see. But where did he start? He was a doctor back in the day. He was an emergency room doctor here in Melbourne, Australia, and he would work as an emergency room doctor to save up money to make his feature debut. That was debut feature, and that was Mad Max from 1979. In a self-destructing world, a vengeful Australian policeman sets out to stop a violent motorcycle gang, starring Mel Gibson, of course. Not really a very well-known actor outside of his. No, he hasn't done anything else.
No, he's never done anything. He's never been controversial, that's for sure.
No. Other people, Steve Bisley is in this, and I don't expect our non-Australian audience to know who Steve Bisley is, but our Australian audience would be like, that dude. Very, very well-known Australian actor locally. He was in The Great Gatsby, for those of you who are playing at home. And you don't know. Hugh Keys-Byrne, notable in this mainly because he plays the bad guy in this film, but he also played a Morton Joe in Fury Road. So other than that, I don't think you're going to know a whole lot of people in this film. There's a few fairly well-known Australian names and faces. You'll be like, oh, I know that face. I've seen him in stuff. But when it comes to big names, we're talking Mel Gibson here. So this is a very low-budget film, I think. I don't exactly know what the budget was. It's his first film, as I sort of said. Where are we? So budget $300K. Now,
$300K.
Now, I don't know what films were being made for in '79, but I don't think you would have been too many films coming out of Hollywood on that budget. Probably a fairly reasonable budget for an Australian feature, I think. I don't know.
I reckon so at that time, I
mean, I'm sorry. I'm going to put my cinema studies hat on for a moment here, and say stuff like there was a point in time around that period where there was sort of almost a renaissance of Australian cinema, and that was off the back of government funding. We've seen Gallipoli on this show, but the other Mel Gibson, which is a very, very fine film. Other films, Picnic at Hanging Rock, very famous. Break 'em a Rant, less well known outside Australia, but very well known within Australia. So Break 'em a Rant, for example, was made on 800,000 in 1980. So that's over double what this was, and that was set during the Boer Wars in South Africa. And so there was a real renaissance of Australian cinema coming out of the 70s into the 80s, but with these grand historical epics, about glorious Australians, doing glorious things in war and that sort of thing. Very romanticized Australian films in a way.
Yeah.
Whereas it's almost interesting because have you ever seen the documentary Not Quite Hollywood?
No.
I used to work with someone who knew the director, so it's
we don't joke when we have all the connections, ladies and gentlemen.
It's a documentary about Ozploitation cinema, and Quentin Tarantino, a big fan of it, helped get the film made, the documentary, and that's a lot of that throughout that film during the 70s. But again, it had the very, the kind of laws that Uwe Boll gets his films made in Germany, very lax tax laws. We had that here for a while as well. and for better for worse, that saw a lot of schlock being made, a lot of sex films, a lot of science fiction films, a lot of genre films, horror films, that kind of thing. And I feel like this is maybe the last wave of it. I'm sorry, I'm having a very long intro here. But this is kind of a last wave of that in a sense. It's just kind of handing the baton over from that exploitation period of, schlocky, crappy, drive-in films, grindhouse films almost, the kind of ones through to the really austere, respectable historical epics that the government was contributing big money towards. And I don't know why this film is so fondly remembered compared to, I can tell you why, it's the sequels. That's why this film is fondly remembered compared to, if you can find Not Quite Hollywood, I do strongly recommend checking it out. It's a wonder, especially if you're a fan of cinema, you're a fan of Australian cinema, even better. But there's a lot of films in there. I'm a fan of Australian cinema, and I sat there and watched it. I'm like, I've never heard of any of this. It's we've kind of wiped that part of our cinema history. We don't like to pay attention to it. We want to remember Peter Weir and Mel Gibson, in Gallipoli. But this film is a mess. An absolute mess of a film. I'm sorry. I know it's got a fucking 6.9 on IMDb. It's got a 73 Metascore, and I know I am here. It's like me opening up and going, you know what? Back in Black isn't a very good record. And just, send the letters through to George, not me. This is not kidding. I'm beating a sacred cow of Australian cinema here. It's not good. It's really, really not good. Like the things that are good in this film, the car chases and some of the stunts are really quite good. And we found ourselves there watching it on the weekend going, holy shit, the stunts in here are great. Which, I mean, if you see Fury Road, he hasn't lost it, right?
No, no one shoots cars. No one shoots car chases like Miller. No one shoots practical car effects and stunts like Miller today. No one. So you can see that from day one. He must have been a car guy. But his stunts are amazing. How did they do this in the 70s on this budget? And how they did it is they didn't have. They just did them. OHS wasn't really a thing. So we just need this car to flip 5 times. So let's just set up the ramp, wait the front, and that's what we'll do. You're good with this, Phil, right? You're good to flip it 5 times to be fine. Yeah. Don't worry, Trevor, I'm fine. A lot of the stunt work in this was done without permits and illegally. This is guerrilla filmmaking. Essentially, a lot of the shooting was done not even a stunt work. Just the shooting was done illegally, as you said, guerrilla style, without permits. One of the more interesting aspects of it, from my perspective, is it was shot down near where I grew up, and sort of southwest Victoria, and a lot of the fun is trying to pick
where certain things were. Okay, I see you Yangs over there. I can see them. Okay, that's down near Geelong. Ford used to make cars in Geelong, where I grew up, which is near where this was shot, and they have a Ford proving ground. At least they used to. But I guess I don't know what they do. They prove cars. Do they drive them? They test them? I don't know what happens at a proving ground.
I can guarantee that this vehicle is a car. That's all.
It may explode. So that's a lot of it shot around those Ford testing tracks. But there's also a certain scenes where you're like, oh, I know where that is. That's the Melbourne University car park. So that's science works, I think. So there's a little bit of trivia there for us. But as a film, the storytelling is really bad. Mostly when we get away from the stuff we know Miller does well, which is car chases and stunts. The story feels really choppy. It sort of cuts and jumps around quite a bit. Like, we never really get much of an introduction about who Max is. The film starts with a car chase of a member of who I imagine was the bikie gang, because I really don't actually get much of an intro as to who this guy is, who Mad Max is chasing, why they're chasing him, why he's driving like a maniac. It just is. And we don't really get a lot of background about the world we're living in. Like, apparently I always thought of this as a post-apocalyptic film. And
it's not. It's kind of mid-apocalypse.
I guess so, but we're not given a lot of context about the apocalypse.
No.
My friend Michelle, who I was watching this with, said to me at some points, you said this is post-apocalyptic, is it? I'm like, kind of thought it was. I mean, plot keywords on IMDb. Post-apocalypse is the first one. And I'm like, there's no, I don't think post-apocalyptic, you're thinking, post-nuclear war or something, especially in the 80s or the 70s. And there's no real hint of that. Like, the world seems kind of shitty and kind of half-assed, and the police just get around in bicycle, by motorcycle levers. But there's no real actual,
the best way to kind of describe it for anyone who hasn't seen this is think of the alternative reality for Back to the Future Part 2, where it's Biff Tannen has taken over. That's it. That's what
about it. Yeah, maybe a little bit more run down, right? It's kind of chaotic. It's it's like a Donald Trump who won a second term. That's what it's like. So that's an odd one. And the editing is kind of funky in the sense that, like, there are lots of really short scenes that don't seem to add very much. Like, it'd be like him sitting on the beach with his wife, and then we'll cut to somewhere else where something else is going on, and then we'll cut back to him, Max, doing something else. And, it doesn't actually, these three scenes don't really seem to have any connection. They don't seem to be necessarily pushing the story forward. It's almost like, we've seen some bad films on this show before, like really deeply unsuccessful films. And the feeling, maybe you remember Ballistic X versus Sever. I don't know if you remember that one. Yep. How
I'm feeling that in my guts.
And then the funny thing is, like, they would just be, you almost felt like they ran out of time, or they ran out of money, or they just didn't storyboard it, or they didn't shoot everything they needed to shoot. And then they got into the edit bay and they've gone, crap, we've got to stretch this to 90 minutes. And we've got 2 hours of footage. So, maybe we use that take where the guy in the background was laughing and looking at the camera, cause we don't have another take to put in. You know what I mean? Like, there are takes in there. It's kind of like they put them in there because they needed to stretch the film out to 80, 90 minutes to get it across the line as a feature. But which is weird for a film as revered as this to have that vibe of, unsuccessful student films that are just spliced together from whatever footage they had.
Yeah.
That's how this film feels until probably into the third act. In the third act, they kind of get their shit together.
Yeah.
In the third act, we have, I mentioned earlier, we have a bad guy, toe cutter, played by Hugh Keysburn, and it's basically, it's a giant chase. Now, basically, Mad Max now is now hunting them down in the spirit of revenge, and that's kind of nice. It's nice. It's kind of fun. It's more, and that's the reason why that's fun is because Miller isn't trying to do the relationship story between Max and his wife anymore, which is deeply unconvincing. and really kind of dull. And you know, some people say somebody said to me, Susie, the co-host of my my other podcast, The Throwback, available now on Spotify. Two new episodes dropped this week. He's told me this week that she walked out of Fury Road after 20 minutes and was bored silly, which stuns me because I think it's one of the greatest action films ever made, and one of my favorite films, I think. But you notice he doesn't do any of that relationship shit in that. Like, it's just go to work. Her complaint is it's a big car chase from start to finish. They go across that way, and then they drive back, and you're like, I don't see what the problem with that is.
Does she have a problem with the first Terminator movie? Because that is just one long chase sequence as well.
I'll have to ask. It is on our wheel, the Terminator. It's on our wheel on the throwback to watch at some future date. So, you know, I don't think. Well, I haven't seen everything else that George Miller's done, but in the Mad Max world, he's kind of done away with these human relationships. This is a film that kind of had to happen because he doesn't have. You know, his motivation is pretty well fixed at the end of his film. He's a revenge-filled asshole who will do what needs to be done to survive, and that's what he does in the next 3 films. And we don't have to worry about the fact that something happened that caused him to be a revengeful asshole because it's already happened. So this is a film we had to have to get the other 3, and I'm okay with that. It's just it's not an easy watch. It's a pretty bad film, frankly.
It hasn't aged well, and you know, just visually, it's kind of just always. This is something I consistently find harder and harder to do. Is going back to pre-high def and just seeing the muddy visuals. It's always nice when you get the remastered versions of this. Like, oh my god, look, I can actually see all the colors and the lines and the detail. It's beautiful. I can actually see how it's supposed to be filmed. That's the blessing of film. It has infinite depth, unlike digital, which has got a certain amount of depth.
It's not even just over picture quality. I'm okay with that in the sense it's George Miller in his embryonic stage. He's learning his craft on the job, and he's becoming the great director he would become, you know, a couple of years later when Road Warrior came out. But that doesn't make this actually enjoyable to watch this again. I thought of this while we were talking about Sid and Nancy. That makes this a cinematic curiosity in the same vein as Sid and Nancy. Not something you'd necessarily say, sit down and watch it unless you're a student of film or just a big fan of, if you're a big fan of George Miller and the Mad Max films, check it out once or twice, but stick to the other 3.
Absolutely agree. And that's really saying something when you think of Beyond Thunderdome, because that came out at a point where every single bloody action movie that came out, so like, yeah, we need to have a kid in this. Like, no, you don't. You don't fucking need a kid. No.
I don't know who that is swearing in the comments there, but I don't know what you're talking about. This is my shirt. I bought it.
Hello there, sir. Hello.
I am nothing. I'm promoting. Yeah. Merchandising.
You just wait for the Julian Smith flamethrower.
Julian Smith, the breakfast cereal. Actually, it wouldn't surprise me if there is one. As I said, he is huge in South Korea in more ways than one. Yes, Mad Max, it was a hard watch. It was a really hard watch. And as excited as I am to see what happens to Furiosa, this one was... I was surprised at how much I disliked this film.
Yeah, it's so strange when you go back and revisit those originating works, and you kind of think, oh wow, really, that guy made that masterpiece? Like, going back and watching Following, Chris Nolan's first feature film, I think comparatively it is better than Mad Max, but it's still kind of like, okay, that's rough. You are just kind of throwing everything at the wall with playing with the chronology of the timeline and doing all of this stuff. You're just seeing what fits right now, aren't you? And I'm entirely guilty of that myself. It is a way of finding your taste. Vaughn, available on Amazon.com. It's
quality read. I say it's the mystery for me here is it's not that he became a great director. Everyone has to start learning somewhere, and what better place to start? Especially when you do something as good as a good car chase scene. You do it as well, as Miller already did to start with. The question I had was, how did he get money for the second one on this?
Well, the budget, looking at Wikipedia, this movie ended up raking in $100 million.
Eventually.
Worldwide, yeah.
Okay, well, obviously it made money, but I think I know in the States that Mad Max came out after Mad Max 2 in the States. So
I think that's right, yeah.
Mad Max was just called Mad Max. I mean, it was just called The Road Warrior, I think it was released in the States.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that hit in the States. That was the big hit in the States initially. And then they went back and they were, oh, well, we've got this other one that no one's seen. And they dumped that into the cinemas in the US. And I suspect that is why it's got that really nice gross, is because
people went back and rewatched.
They went it back on a strength for the second one. So maybe it made a lot of money in Australia the first time around. I don't know.
Maybe.
But I'm just curious. Like, I mean, it just does not strike me as the kind of film that would make a lot of money. It's very, very violent.
One of the other things I think to try and remember with a lot of these movies and their budgets, particularly the older you get with the movie, the longer they were in theaters. Like Titanic, one of the reasons why it took so much money was because it was in the cinemas for like 8 months. Something ridiculous.
The other thing I was thinking was maybe the drive-in circuit. This is more of a drive-in film. And Julian, if you look at the bottom left of the screen, George has a caption that tells you what film we are watching. It is Mad Max, the 1979 George Miller classic.
Yep.
But you're right, and it's kind of a drive-in film, right? Maybe
it's perfect for that.
Actually, if you go to the drive-in in Melbourne, in one of the few that's left in Coburg. I don't know if you've ever been out there, George.
Yeah, you took me there.
We went there once, didn't we? I don't remember what we saw, but we did go.
I don't know.
There's actually a replica of the Mad Max car is above the box office.
Yes.
When you're driving in. So it's iconic. It's an iconic film from my distaste. Aside. It's very fondly remembered. And it was, I was just, I'd be interested to know this. I wonder if it's a book or something. I'd be actually quite fascinated to know about the making of this film and like how because the budget for Mad Max 2, by the way, was $3 million.
Wow.
So that is just 1981. So 2 years later, he's got a tenfold increase in his budget. And yeah, I wonder where that money came from. My only suggestion to Michelle, who I was watching this with my bubble buddy, was that Victoria Police, that's legal. I'm allowed to do that. And was it maybe it's because of the government? There was some sort of special, favorable government, tax treatment that encouraged people to invest in films. Again, a la Uwe Boll in Germany, and or there was some sort of government funding that it got. I don't know. That's fascinating to me because it's really kind of a crappy. The first one was kind of crappy. And the second one is a stone cold masterpiece.
100%. In some ways, it's kind of like a little bit like what Sam Raimi did with the Evil Dead movies. Of the first one, that one is an out-and-out classic, regardless of how old the movie gets or anything like that. It is a brilliant piece of horror. The second one, he essentially remakes the movie, but does it with a bigger budget and a slightly different focus. And George Miller kind of did the same thing with this. He's like, okay, I'm going to take what works in the first one and just expand on that and cut up so much of the fat, and it works, and it's given him one hell of a career.
So you can forget The Witches of Eastwick.
And Baby.
He directed that. And I was saying though, again, that he has won an Oscar, by the way. If you're not didn't know this, George Miller does have an Oscar. It was for Happy Feet, though.
Yep.
Bit of the yin yang there, right?
Yep. Happy Feet, Fury Road was in contention for Oscars. Same director, lovely. It's like kind of going, oh yeah, you know what? Quentin Tarantino's final movie is going to be a Disney film about flowers.
That would be great. I would love to see that. I've frozen. Okay, I think we've lost George. I've just been told that they have lost power up in the mountains in the King Lake region where George and co call home. Unfortunately, they are out of power, so they've used a bit too much. They've run out, and the bad news for the rest of you means you are stuck with me. And that is never a good thing when it's solo. It's like Statler without Waldorf is what it is. It's Hall without Oates. Julian, I can dial you in. I don't know how much you're going to want to know about. I actually can't dial you in because I don't have the keys to this thing. That is George's has the actual ability to invite people and stuff. Hang on a second. Let me see if I can send you a link. This is an unprecedented occurrence, I should note, because this has never happened to us before. Let me just drop this in. See if that works, Jules. I don't know if you can join by your phone, George. If George, you're watching, we're just trying to live broadcasting people. We've never had a power outage before. We've just had people storming off. We had Archimedes, 2 Saxons. Wow, that sounds sexy. We've had Archimedes who's refused to appear. We've just had shows that no one listened to because we're not very good. But a power outage is a first, and you never know, they might come back up. Sometimes it comes up pretty quick. But if you've never been out to the Julian is doing his hair, that's a plus. And this was going to be a surprise. Julian was going to be our guest for next week. So I have got no idea what we're going to talk about, considering we haven't planned this. But we will try and crack on for another 20 minutes or so and get you through your normally scheduled sort of length of something like this. And we'll see if George can rejoin if the power gets back up there. But for those of you who don't know, George lives in the King Lake region of Victoria. I'm probably not doxing him by saying that. It's a big part of the country. I'd never even heard of King Lake before the 2007 bushfires. When was Black Saturday, people? No, 2010, I think. The bushfire, 2009 bushfires. I'll get there eventually. And that basically was almost completely wiped out by the bushfires. George doesn't look like it doesn't look like George is going to be able to rejoin us, which is unfortunate. Do you say you can't get back on? Is your power back on, George? Do we want to leave and come back in? Is that what we want to do? This is I'm sure this is fascinating podcasting for the people listening at home. George can probably edit this shit out because it's not much fun for people listening on the podcast. It's probably not much fun for people watching me, in fairness. But anyway, yes, the area of King Lake was basically nuked almost by the incredible firestorms that happened as part of those Black Saturday bushfires. And it's way up in the hills. May I have to end the show and start again? You give me the okay, and we will do that. And people who are, I see we have 3 people watching. Some of you are on Twitch, I think. If you stick around for a few minutes, we will see if we're gonna see if Jules can join us first, George. Let's see how we go with that. And we'll see if I can make that work. What if you I'm just going to send George a link. And I don't think I don't even have the. I can't even put the commercials back on for you. I don't think. Because George needs to actually click the button to let me do that. So that's not going to be possible for me to play you the commercials, which is a shame because they're kind of good. I think coming up next was a commercial about Jesus Christ Superstar, the concert. So, that's one for a blast from the past for those of us old enough to remember that shit. Wow. I should have Greg on for Jesus Christ Superstar. Well, that would require Patria Greg to finish his podcast of his own. He's got his own podcast to finish. Not the film, it was the musical, the John Farnham one. But he has to, he should finish his own podcast before he goes around mucking around with other people's podcasts. We've been asking for the Smith Cut to be released for some time now. I don't see any sign of it. So I'm not going to entertain his procrastinating any longer. Come on. Just got some content here for you in the meantime. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's just going to be the show from now on, by the way. For those of you who'd like to tune in, that's just going to be the Jeopardy theme song for a couple of hours. I hope you enjoy it. I know I do. There's nothing like some thinking music to try and figure out what the flipping hell we are going to do, given our circumstance. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have any guest hosts join us because I don't have the keys to the software we use to run these things, unfortunately. I don't generally sully my hands with that sort of technical detail. I am a talent. It's not really my job. I leave that to others. I have assistants. We have people for that. George, So I don't get down. I don't have the keys to this software. I don't have the logins, and I can't let people in. I can't share videos. I don't think George is going to be. It's going to let George back in. So I think we're just going to. If it doesn't look like to me like the power has come back up there in the hills in a way that's going to be meaningful for this evening. So you put up with me a little bit longer, I guess, because I kind of wanted to finish what we had today, and I wanted to talk a little bit about because, well, you're here, I'm here. You got anywhere else to be? You'd probably be there now, wouldn't you? You wouldn't be watching this shit. I was going to talk a little bit about my expedition into the 80s teen comedy work of John Hughes. So those who watched last week or downloaded last week or listened to it in some way, shape or form might recall that we had a chat about the other John Hughes film, which The Breakfast Club. That's right. That's the famous one. I would never somehow had avoided seeing The Breakfast Club my entire life, and found it was actually quite good, which is a shock to me, considering I was not expecting to like it. I mean, it was almost 40 years old. It's targeted a completely different audience to me. I was much too young to have gone to high school in the 80s, unlike some people. So I kind of missed it, but it was actually quite an enjoyable little film. And had some. It's just a statement of fact, Julian. It was a fun little film, some really great characters, and you felt a real warmth from John Hughes with those characters. This week I decided to go in again for a little bit more after telling George last week that I didn't think I had seen many John Hughes films. It turned out I had seen most of John Hughes' films. I just hadn't seen these 80s teen films. And so we went back to where I went back to where it started this week and watched 16 Candles, the 1984 comedy romance directed and written by John Hughes, starring Molly Ringwald, Anthony Michael Hall. And that's about it, I think. I don't think there's anyone else of note in this film. John Cusack, of course, and his sister is in it, is here as well. Joan Cusack, though I don't think she has any lines. So what is the film about? If you've not seen it, a girl's sweet 16th birthday becomes anything but special as she suffers from every embarrassment possible. So we essentially wake up with Molly Ringwald on her 16th birthday. It is the day before her sister is due to get married. And apparently in the excitement and rush of getting ready for that wedding, everybody has forgotten it is her birthday. And not just like actually literally forgotten, which is kind of ridiculous. So how do you forget your kid's birthday? Even if this is like a Hughesian American Midwest family with a lot of kids. Sorry, George. In backstage, I can't help you into the Georgie's backstage, but I can't let you in. If you can message me and let you know your power is back on, we can try and restart this show. If you want to try that, I can quit this and start the new one. Otherwise, you're just going to have to listen to me waffle on for a little bit longer about 16 Candles. Sorry again, audience, for the interruptions and for being stuck with me for the second half of this. What is it about John Hughes and people forgetting very obvious things you should not forget? I mean, if we go to his probably most famous film, of course, 1990's Home Alone, an acknowledged Christmas classic, the fucking family go to Paris and they forget their goddamn kid. They don't even realize until they've been in Paris for a couple of days. I mean, what the fuck is it with these people and their shitty memories? I don't know what the go is there. Sorry, wait with me a second. I am talking to my co-host as we speak. And yeah, anyway, I forget her birthday. So from there, as it sort of, if the synopsis sort of indicates, it sort of goes from one sort of disaster to another. Her bedroom is taken over by two of her grandparents who've come to visit for the wedding. They bring with them what I think is maybe the film's weakest link. They have a Chinese exchange student staying with them, played by Getty Watanabe, who I'm guessing from that surname is probably of Japanese extraction. Watanabe usually being a Japanese surname. He plays the Chinese exchange student Long Duck Dong. And wow, it was the mid 80s, but this is next level racist shit. Not on the kind of, racist, sort of name there, which, Long Dong, bit of a joke name. The fact that every time, he's on screen, there's a Chinese gong sound, or someone mentions his name. Oh, Long Duck Dong. Crash of the gongs. You're like, oh, that's kind of fucked up. And apparently, according to the actor, that was all added in post-production, unsurprisingly. And he had no idea they were doing it, which is great. And in addition to the racist name, the racist implication of the gong every time he's on screen, the portrayal of the character is this crazy, wild, out of control, Asian American character is just offensive, like sex crazed, irresponsible, off the hook, flying, by the seat of his pants up character. He gets drunk, he steals a car, that sort of thing. It's really quite offensive. Oh, hang on.
I'm here.
He's here. He's back.
For how long, I don't know.
Welcome back. See, let us not be said that we don't adapt to changing circumstances. It's awfully dark there. Did you just went out like that?
With a battery, Philips Hue light, and my head torch.
Oh, it's like it's not just an episode of a podcast. It's an Indiana Jones film.
It is. I will melt your fucking face. So you were talking about 16 Candles.
Yes, I was just talking about the incredibly racist portrayal of the Asian character Long Duck Dong, and the gong every time he's on screen or says something, or his name's mentioned, to the really offensive way he was portrayed of just being sex crazed and hook kind of character, and it was. I was just stunned by it. I mean, it's not something you'd expect even as late as the 80s. The quote from the actor. Oh, there we go.
It's Julian as well.
No, special guest. Special guest.
Special guest.
We can't have that much, we can't have that much talent on at the same time, so we don't have it in the budget.
We can't afford those residuals.
Etc. Yeah, okay, I'm good with that.
Welcome. You're a week early.
Racism in 16 Candles.
I'm normally fashionably late. I'd be here this time next year, and we'd still be dialing this shit in.
He refused to. He didn't get 100 brown M&Ms in his shot glass. He wasn't going on.
No. The deal was, if the big guy doesn't wear my shirt, if the talent doesn't say yes to the smirt, I'm not here.
I wore a shirt. It turned up in the cleanup of my t-shirt collection this week.
I mean your t-shirt collection.
I just cleaned it out, right? There's a garbage bag going to the salvos. This one made the cut.
This just in. Smirt made the cut.
That's it.
As you were always. Go. Apropos of racism and gongs and gongs, etc. Go, Andy. Go.
The interesting sort of thing here is that this has actually become kind of a focal point for the portrayal of Asian American characters in American cinema. The interesting stat here is there's 17 million Asian Americans in the US and 17 million Italian Americans in the US. If I asked you to think of a famous film about Italian Americans, what would you say?
Godfather.
Sopranos, Goodfellas, Rocky. Can you name one memorable film about Asian Americans?
Yeah, but I don't want to say it because it's as racist as all the others. So, and I don't really want to pile on that particular Uriah Heep.
Maybe we might say filthy rich Asians now, right? Like it's or potential. Well, I mean, Parasite was not an American film, but it did win an Oscar. But I mean, it's certainly notable to know that it's a notable point in history of really a nice sort of yin yang to sort of go. This is how they portray the character representative of 17 million Americans. And I'm not going to hear say Australians have been any better. I mean, no. I couldn't name a famous Australian American, Australian Asian actor of note.
I didn't go with that.
I can't think of many Asian Australian actors of note. Interestingly, there was also John Oliver this week. John Oliver's show was about Asian Americans, and apparently in a poll where they were asked to name a famous Asian American, the number one response from Americans was Jackie Chan. Number two was Bruce Lee, who died in 1973. And I don't even know if he was American.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, but that's taking it somewhere weird.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I've got a little bit off course here, but you can't really. I think it's just worthy to pull it out as being one of the most noticeable features of a film was the incredibly racist treatment of that character, because it's really in your face. Like, even if they'd gone without the gong every time he said something, that would have probably made it a little bit easier.
Well, that's one of the things of looking at movies much like 16 Candles, and you think about Porky's and Animal House and some of those kind of titans of 70s and early 80s comedy is they are entirely inappropriate now. Entirely, for so many reasons, whether it's sexism, racism, xenophobia, anything. It is just like you were talking last week about the unnecessary upshot in Breakfast Club and things like that. It's like it's all wrong. So these are kind of the movies where, like, Disney Plus so often is in some of their older animated movies. So like, this is representative of a time that is no longer socially appropriate. It has that little calling card for it. It's
well, I mean, it's certainly true here. I mean, the other part of it, I guess, that was noticeable to me was I guess one of the plot lines here is that we have the character played by Anthony Michael Hall, who is weirdly just credited as geek. His character doesn't have a name according to IMDb. He's just he has a goal. He has a lot of lines, and he's on screen a lot of the time. So
still better than protagonist. I'll just say.
I'll pay that. But at one point in time, he's basically trying to. He's one thing I'll say for this: you can definitely see the influence of this film in films like American Pie. 20 years later. Basically, he's that character. He's almost like Jason Biggs' character, trying to score, trying to lose his virginity. Initially with Molly Ringwald. Later on, this is one of the really strange subplots here. Molly Ringwald's crush, played by Michael Schufling, who plays Jake, wants to basically get his girlfriend, his drunk and passed out girlfriend, out of the way so he can get with Molly Ringwald. So he basically hands her off to Anthony Michael Hall and say, go drive her somewhere else. And she's passed out in the car. And he's like, oh, you can pretty much do anything to her. I think there's actually a line where he says something like that, and you're like, oh. And then later on, she wakes up in the car with Anthony Michael Hall, and she's like, did we, And he goes, yeah, I think so. And you're like, oh,
there's so much wrong with that.
I mean, and the really weird, quite aside, the other part that was wrong with this is the fact that Jake character is played by Michael Schufling. Viggo Mortensen auditioned for that role, and they chose this dude. And Michael Schufling is a name that was, his last role was in 1991, so, we know we worked out better there.
Plateau for him.
A little bit. I mean, it's you're going to come back strong in the next. It's only been 30 years.
He's going to be the resurgent cast in the next Tarantino movie.
I would like to see that. That would be fun. But the Tarantino remake of Breakfast Club, except they're all elite Navy SEALs. But so that's a really so we've got the racist angle. We have the date rape angle. which is really working for this film.
All comedy gold.
Comedy gold.
gold.
And I guess a really weird angle. I'm going to spoil it here, but I feel it's a 37-year-old film, so that's okay. But Molly Ringwald ends up with Jake at the end of the film, and that's portrayed as a win. Where Jake's actually being portrayed to be kind of a douche. Like, he's got a girlfriend. He wants to cheat on his girlfriend, so he hands off his passed-out girlfriend to a sleazy kid he just met, who can't drive, and has her drive her somewhere, even though he told him he can't drive. So Jake's kind of a sleazebag. He's kind of a dick. But we have one of those classic John Hughes endings where they, this is one of the good things about the film is now I recognize the reference where they're sitting there on a table and they got the birthday cake with the candles in between him, and they kiss and it's been ripped off so memorably by Family Guy. Mm-hmm. Where Peter Griffin is sitting opposite. He's like, "Not like this, Jake. Not like this." I didn't recognize the reference before now, but yeah. So it's kind of portrayed as like happy, upbeat ending. As the girl got the guy, and her birthday ended up being all right. Thank you, Greg.
I think that might be George, but I'm not going to swear to it.
We're doing the best we can in extraordinarily trying circumstances, and I don't take advice from people who haven't finished one episode yet.
Do you hear that?
Hashtag release the Smith cut.
If I had access to the files, the Smith cut would be it. But no.
There's always an excuse.
There's always something there to remind me.
You will forgive us, Greg. There was a blackout at up in the hills, so
it's still going.
That's why we haven't released the podcast.
Yeah, there is a ongoing
surviving on this battle.
It looks like a KGB interrogation in George's room right now. Tell us about the secret files. We have ways of making you talk. But yeah, so it's a really odd little film. 16 Candles, in a sense, it's got I guess again, like you go, it was the 80s, so racism, whatever. It was the 80s, date rape, whatever. But just the whole, it's the 80s. Well, the girl ends up with a guy who was cheating on his girlfriend. And,
that makes it all worthwhile, right?
It's an odd little film in that sense, and I think it's funny for people like me. The 80s don't quite seem like that long ago. I remember 1984. So it just does go to show how far we've come. On the upside, Anthony Michael Hall is very, very funny in this film. And if you like me, you grew up on the teen films of the 90s. You'll see, as I sort of said, you'll see the influence of films like this bleeding through very strongly into those. He plays the geek very well. Molly Ringwald's, adorable and funny, and she was at the peak of her powers.
She's got permanent kitten.
I missed that.
Oh, we've got a frozen Julian.
Maybe he's got a blackout now.
Everybody knows it. Nobody's brave enough to say
all it. All the kids are doing it. Cool kids. You're back. You said you were going to challenge that appraisal of Molly Ringwald.
Oh, it wasn't an appraisal. It was an assessment of a mouth odor from, generations afar. But I don't hear either of you disagreeing.
You
have consensus. We have quorum. We can move on.
It's a funny little film. It's funny, but having now seen Breakfast Club, and you go, okay, I can see that came a little bit after this. You can sort of see him. It would a little bit again, like we're talking about George Miller there. He's kind of perfecting his craft a little bit, and I think that was a significantly better film on a lot of levels, and had a lot less as problematic as it was in parts. It was a lot less problematic, and it was also interesting because sorry.
Are you saying plot-wise it's problematic?
Problematic for politically problematic. You see, culturally problematic. There was one or two moments in Breakfast Club. You're like, ooh, but maybe not to the degree of 16 Candles. But it's also interesting now that I've sort of had that conversation with you last week, George. I have seen most of his films.
Yeah.
Just they got a little bit more adult as we move forward.
Yep.
You start to see elements You can see elements of this film in, his stuff sort of becoming more mature in things like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Uncle Buck, that sort of thing.
Definitely.
Home Alone. But I think the plan, given time this weekend, I am going to go right back to where it started for him, or well, close to, and see Pretty in Pink.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Actually, that's a couple of years after this. I thought this was before this. So he wrote Pretty in Pink, and it came out in 1986. So that's my next target when it comes to this. If you're looking to watch this, I had quite a unique experience seeing this film. We got a shiny plastic disc and put it in a thing that reads a plastic disc, and it puts it on the television. It was mind-blowing.
That doesn't sound like real technology. I'm sorry.
It's legit. I'm sorry.
It's just, no. I mean, on a disc, don't be silly. Physical is not.
If Jim Morrison can predict it, it's real.
Yeah, but he was ethereal, so it doesn't count.
And he died.
That's my thoughts on 16 Candles. It was not. It was, again, I'm just going to have to put it down in the cinematic curiosity bucket. It's not really a film I'd recommend just because of its politics, but it's worth watching if you're interested in that sort of thing. If you're interested in sort of seeing where teen films came from.
I think it's very important as like a foundation movie for how we got to the teen movies that we get to in these days, because as you said, so much of this is kind of the launching point for what was American Pie, which was one of the most successful teen movies of recent time and spawned ridiculous amount of spin-offs. And that kind of way of telling a teen movie, like we talked about before, which we don't really get too much of it in modern cinema anymore, that's still kind of the standard or the stereotype of story that you're going to get. It is kind of borderline gross out comedy, usually talking about farts, unnecessary erections, and sex. And so, like, yeah, those are points of funny comedy, but this is kind of where it really got popularized.
I think you're right. And so, I mean, I think people want to see stories about themselves on a screen, right?
Yeah.
To a degree. And you remember being at high school, and obviously it's turned up to 11. But everyone remembers being unpopular or being rejected or trying to get a date. At least some of us do.
Some of us, yeah.
And losing their virginity, that kind of thing. It's all part of the experience of being a teenager, so I'm told.
Admit it, you were never a teenager. You were born a curmudgeon.
I was born a curmudgeon.
You had full teacher consent.
Consent is important.
So yeah, it's a cinematic curiosity, and I can't actually recommend it because I think it would upset people. If you showed this to your kids, they'd probably get pissed. I'd be interested in like Julian. I'd be interested in your young folks think of it, the younger Smiths.
Oh, I think they'd tear it to shreds, based on the fact that it had nice segue, by the way. And can I compliment you on your segues? Like, you are so polished on the segue front that there's no carpet to polish that particular segue shaped turd into anymore. It's just a polished concrete. Like magic, man. Smooth out.
I can only give it. The East German judge is going to give that one a 6.2, unfortunately.
Yeah, Germany, mille points. My kids would decimate that for its lack of relevance. Firstly, I reckon to give explanation to the 1.3 of us tuning in. My kids, what are my kids? My kids are kids. 20, 13, and 11. And the 20-year-old would go, dick joke. Yeah. And the others would go, I'm walking away. This is boring crap. And it means nothing to me. But that's partially more than anybody else their age. That needs severe disclaimers.
I'd just like to say that the feedback coming through George is. Are you on your phone, George?
Yeah.
The feedback coming through George is. The feedback coming through George's phone at the moment sounds like the droid on Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back.
That was the best moment of the podcast, by the way.
I just
did then.
And by the way, I have now figured out, it's called a Viper probe droid. So, Google, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Google.
While we've got you around for a little bit longer, by the way, I'm seeing stuff on my Facebook now. Power's out across the city, so it's not just you.
I'm about to battery power too.
I am in Melbourne.
Parts of Melbourne, I'm saying. It's people in Seaford have no power. You can call that Melbourne.
Seaford? I mean, nothing personal.
They only just got the internet. It's fine.
Yeah, but they've got all the wind, except for the bit Kinglake's got. So
yeah,
that's okay.
They got dial-up down there, I think.
Down there.
George is on 28.8 baud modem. He's good.
Anyway, I smeared your segue. Go.
But I think you had something else. Did you have something else to talk about tonight while we still got you, George?
Yeah, I wanted to just quickly talk about the new Netflix show, Sweet Tooth. Produced by Robert Downey Jr. and his wife Susan Downey. It is adapted from a DC Comics, a very well-regarded DC Comics series about a post-apocalyptic world where there are hybrid kids born with animal elements. The primary protagonist of the show is a young boy called Gus, who has got deer ears and horns. He's got the reflective eyes of a deer. There's little attributes of him, but there are lots. But at the same time, whilst this miracle has happened of these hybrid babies suddenly being born, there is poignantly a terrible strain of the flu that ravages the world and kills many people. So
sorry, that was inappropriate. Sorry, go. Greg got me. Sorry. Sorry.
Do you need a moment, Julian?
I'll give you a moment.
But what's interesting about this, and particularly in the first episode, is it does...
In the meantime, Karl Marx has offered to sell us some followers, which is interesting. But anyway, sorry to interrupt you. I just sort of thought, Karl Marx is seizing the means of production over here. Sorry to interrupt you.
Unbelievable. Don't you know we're professionals here?
Nothing.
Yeah. So the first episode, it's kind of weird watching it now that we live in a mid/semi-post-pandemic world, and the depiction of the apocalypse, this pandemic that eviscerates the world, it's kind of crazy and it's over-exaggerated to a point where it's like, okay, it's a pandemic that's happened and people have immediately kind of gone into looting and all of that sort of stuff. And it's weird looking at it through the lens of COVID now, because it's like, okay, well, I don't see anyone hoarding toilet paper, and the way the military are kind of rounding people up and all of that stuff is like, it's hyper accentuated variations of some of the shit that we've seen in various parts of the world. So it's oddly juxtapositioned with modern sensibilities, but this is a comic book series that has been released for many years at this point, and a sequel series is in production. The story itself is quite your typical kind of post-apocalyptic journey to heroism, but it's told on a very personal state. I don't want to go into it too much because I don't really want to spoil anything, because it actually is very well paced. And I'm going to bring up the cast. Hang on. Sweet Tooth. Because it has... the narrator is James Brolin, who's possibly the biggest name in it, aside
Certainly
from...
the one I've heard of.
You'd know Adil Akhtar. He plays Dr. Singh. He was also he was Waj. No, not Waj. He was Vesage in Four Lions.
Oh, gosh, you're going back a very, very long. It's 11 years ago.
Yeah, I know. The other two people that you'll know from TV shows more than anything is Dania Ramirez, who she played the character Maya in Heroes season 2, I think it was, and Nonso Anozi, he was in Game of Thrones. He was the apparently really rich guy who tried to woo what's her face, the mother of dragons. I can't remember her name anymore.
Khaleesi?
Yes, that's the one.
What do I know about? I've never even watched a show.
I don't know, but I've always found him to be miscast in everything.
You know things.
But I've always found him to be kind of wrongly cast. Like, he was cast as the character Butler in Disney's woeful Artemis Fowl, but in this he's actually really good. He plays an ex linebacker that has sort of like had to just do what he needs to do to survive in this post-apocalyptic world, and he's actually pretty good at it. He's pretty good at being a bit of an asshole. So he actually really shines quite nicely. But the star of the show is Gus, our deer-horned protagonist, called Christian Convey. And he's been in a few things. Like, he was an 8-year-old boy in Venom, but nothing. This is certainly his big show, and he's actually really surprisingly good. It's for young actors. It's always that. Or is he going to end up being like young Anakin Skywalker, or is he actually going to be any good? And this kid's good. They don't put him in too much, kind of like what they did with Gal Gadot for the first Wonder Woman of, okay, this is your play area, this is your safe space, just be in that bubble. They don't really go too far beyond his capacities, but it is a highly enjoyable show. It has got great production value. I do recommend it. The whole season is available on Netflix. They've just dumped the whole thing. I heartily recommend this, especially following the general failure that was Jupiter Legacy,
which has now been axed.
Yeah. Oh, it's been mutated to something else in the Mark Millerverse.
Axed.
There's no way around it.
Brutal.
It's been what we in the corporate world called right-sized, and that right-sized is 0. It's got an 8.3 on IMDb. Sweet Tooth.
Yeah. Oh, the other name you probably know is Will Forte.
Oh, of course, I do know that name.
Yeah.
Is this for children?
No. No.
Saying that very decisively.
It's much more mature. It's borderline young adult, but the themes and the depictions of stuff are probably, I would say, if you're under the age of 15, you might get a little unnerved by it, or you might not fully understand the narratives that they're kind of playing with for some of it. It's not overly violent or particularly bad language, certainly no sex in it or anything like that. So content-wise, it would be fine for young kids, but just the themes that it deals with could be quite confronting for younger kids.
I just more like sort of like you talked about Raya in The Last Dragon before. That was very much aimed at kids, so this is kind of very much not in that category. You know, while they could watch it, absolutely it's not just for children.
Yeah, absolutely right. And
so rated 4 and up.
Huh?
So rated 4 and up.
You believe in growing your kids up quickly.
Whatever push comes to shove is necessary, then so be it.
They're going to learn it sometime.
They like the Spartans, they leave them out in a craggy rock somewhere out near Donald, and if they survive, and good for them.
This is Sparta. This is Sparta. And sounding like a 95-year-old.
That is an interesting one. I saw that on Netflix. So it looks stupid. That said, we have a bad record of that, because like George described for weeks a show to be called about brain slugs infecting people and making them change their personality. And I thought it was the dumbest idea for a TV show I've ever heard in my entire life. Yet it was fucking brilliant when I got around to watching it. Brain Dead was so good.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Kudos to George. Sometimes the poster looks stupid and the plot looks stupid, but it can still be pretty good.
Just want to highlight this just in. Kudos to George.
I get one a year.
From the talent to you. There's your freebie.
It's in his contract.
Now my battery is about to die.
Yeah, I think we should wrap it up because I think we've gone further than we thought we would there when your power went out and your battery might die. So thank you for joining us and helping us over the line there, Jules. You're going to be on board with us next week to talk about hopefully a fully powered conversation around Firework with Me. So I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it before. I don't think George has seen it before.
No,
you addressed me as George just a second ago, so I was waiting for him to respond.
No, he said Jules.
He said Jules. I said Jules.
That's not what I heard. But anyway, yes, continue.
we'll go to the tape. We'll go to the tape. But we'll be back next week. You'll be back with us. There's a sneak preview this week. We'll be back with us next week to talk about Firework with Me when the power's back on.
And unintentional, sneak preview of the thing that we haven't decided is happening next week. That is definitely now happening. Yes.
It's happening.
Firework with Me.
It's happening. I didn't wear a shirt for nothing.
But it's going to be an interesting.
You've done worse for less. You will again. Don't deny it.
Okay,
it's an interesting show next week. We're going to have
all personal now. At the end.
Shut up. We've got a lot of originals, like a chain movie of the week is Hamlet, which neither me nor Travis have seen. We are all watching Firewalk with Me, which I think Julian is the only one who has seen it. We're probably going to have some early thoughts on Disney Plus new Marvel show Loki. So there's a lot of new stuff that we're going to be talking about. New mixed with old, I guess. Because
I'm gonna
things is current.
If I have time, we've been watching the 1944 film Gaslight just because I like to keep it fresh.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was looking for tips. Thank you for tolerating us, live audience. If any of this makes it into the final podcast version, the sound's going to suck from about the hour mark. We're sorry,
ladies and gentlemen. That is indication that Travis has never actually re-listened to one of our podcasts because there is this little thing that I do called no editing.
Hey, Trav, kudos.
I mean, I have better things to do with my time.
Name one.
John Hughes films.
Enough with the tough questions, Julian.
I'm the Nicole Shavastek of Twitch. Yeah.
Yana Vent, I think.
No, Yana Vent. She's already gone.
But thank you for tolerating us.
Gentlemen.
Good night.
Thank you very much, and good.